Bonjour. This presentation will be in English. So my name is Jenn Kirby. I'm from the University of the West of Scotland, and I'm also where I teach music, and I'm also the president of the Irish Sound Science and Technology Association. So my research is focused on the development of new tools and methods of achieving performer agency in live electronic music and utilizing audiovisual symbiosis to enhance audience engagement. This research is undertaken through the development of new instruments for musical expression, performance systems, new musical works for performance, and the design of middleware to make use of existing musical tools. So the performance of the works serves to both inform the design of the systems and test the validity of the approaches. So the performance becomes quite cyclical in the design. So it's not so the composition and the performance and the design all happen quite cyclically. So the designs then aim to convey a symbiotic relationship between audio and visual gestures in the performance. So what you see and what you hear are very, very much integrated. That there's a similar understanding as if someone was performing on a violin. You don't need to play the violin to understand what this means. So trying to create the same sort of scenario in electronic music, that you don't have to understand really what's working or how it's working, but you have an audio and visual understanding that allows you to at least experience the performance. So that really is to enhance performer agency and audience reception. So this must be achieved whilst retaining real-time control for the performer. So that is to create pseudo-direct causality. So if you imagine when you turn on a light switch, you would say that you turn on the light, but you're not really turning on a light. The electricity is doing that, but it feels very much as you are. So we bypass the fact that you're not, and you say you're turning on the light, okay? So in the same idea, when you're performing with electronics, you're not thinking about that this is getting turned into data and this is getting turned into other manipulations that eventually result in sound. It feels very much real time that you are directly controlling that sound. So that's the general idea, to have that for the performer. So creating audiovisual symbiosis for the audience can be a way of seeing and hearing past technology. So it is not a barrier to the reception of the work. So I will present a very, very quick presentation on two performance systems and two performance pieces that kind of test some of these ideas, try out new approaches for performer agency and for reception and understanding. So Phonetics project is for voice and electronics. It makes use of a game track controller, which is, some of you may be aware of this. It's an old controller built originally for a golf game. It's got a box on the ground and two strings that you pull out of this box. And it's like a joystick where you have X and Y, but you also have a Z, and you have it on both hands, which means you have 6 parameters, and because you've got an X, Y, and a Z on each hand, you can have quite accurate enough 3D spatial awareness of where your hands are, how close your hands are, how far apart they are, etc. It also makes use of a launch pad, and it's quite a modular approach to the design of the system, and is structured improv. It was originally designed in Max, and then I ported it over afterwards to Ableton and Max for Live, hoping to bring down CPU processing, but I didn't do that. Not sure if it was better or worse afterwards, but different. Advantages and disadvantages. So I'll play a very short snippet of this. very short. So this was the original kind of design of the system. So as I said, quite a modular approach. And then I decided that I would just create a patch to take that input from the controller, and as the piece progresses, the parameters, it changes what is being controlled as the piece progresses. So that's kind of the modular approach to that. And then so this is just imported into Ableton. So each track is responsible for a different process, and the Launchpad then just allows you to have a little bit more flexibility. So it's not a linear format. It allows you a bit more flexibility as to what gets turned on and off at any one time, I suppose. Okay, so maybe I'll discuss a little bit more about how these work a little later, or maybe the implications of these kind of things. But I'll quickly move to a piece called Here to Listen for flute and electronics, again using the game track controller, modular approach, structured improv, and this one was built in Max. So I'll play a very short snippet of this, and I've also got a demo of me just going through the technique so you can see kind of how this is working. But this is a demo of a performance. This one has a patch, so it's a bit easier to see how it's working. My playing is very, very poor. I apologize. So I can talk over some of the sounds. So you can see on the left-hand side here, this trigger downwards just triggers a recording of 10 seconds. And then every utterance into the microphone triggers a grain playback. So, and by moving left to right, you can go to the beginning of the sample, or you can go to later in the samples. I guess what we can see maybe from that it's certain gestures suggest certain sounds actually, which is quite interesting. So if I'm trying to to integrate the audible and visual gestures, then I've been approaching it primarily, I guess, obviously, from a sound perspective, and thinking about how visual gesture could match certain things. But interestingly, I'm also being led by some of the visual gestures. So going up to freeze, because you go upwards, it seems to suggest that you play a higher note. You know, it seems to be non-intuitive to play a lower note and to gesture upwards. And other kind of certain things as well are certainly suggestive of different things. So the kind of questions and challenges maybe based around this seem to be, or what I seem to be always asking myself is it possible to achieve kind of virtuosity in electronic music performance? So what does that mean, and what could that mean in performance of electronic music? So when we take away the music from it, how do we assess, how do we judge a performance in electronic music? Because we need a whole new paradigm, really. And there's certainly a lot of work being doing in this regard, but it's still a question I think that remains largely unanswered. Feel free to correct me on that during the break. And also one of the things is in the design of these kind of systems is thinking, is the technology a barrier to the audience? So one of the reasons why I like this controller a lot, not just because of its precision and that it's quite useful and it feels quite good to play, but also because it's tactile and there's strings that the audience can see, that sometimes when things are really invisible, it becomes, the less technology you can see, the more you think about, right? Sometimes that becomes a bit of a problem. One piece of technology that I find quite useful that is non-tactile is using smartphones, because people understand them. Whereas if I could do similar things, right? Using a smartphone, using the gyroscope, or using a Bitolino Riot, but when I wear this on my wrist, no one knows what it is, and I'm going to get asked questions about it, and it becomes just about the technology. Whereas if I'm holding a smartphone, everyone knows what it is, everyone knows it's got hardware, they don't need to ask me about it. And it's not that I'm bothered by the questions, it's more that this is, if that's all we're thinking about, then we're not thinking about the performance at all, really. And we're not thinking about the music at all if we're constantly trying to understand technology, what is happening, you know. So I'm trying to find ways of how we can get past that, so we can just think, well, I don't know how a flute works, or I don't know how a violin works, and that's okay. I can still experience the performance. So and also that it's not a demonstration of technology. As much as I enjoy patching and doing those kind of things, it shouldn't. It's got to be about the output. It's got to be about the music for me. So it's got to facilitate rather than just be technology itself. And is enough performer agency achieved? So with that last piece, the processing is very simple. There's nothing really sophisticated in that. They're quite standard approaches to live electronics. But the idea was to take those standard approaches and learn to interact with them in a very different way. And to learn to control them for someone who doesn't have to be really technically literate, doesn't have to understand what's happening under the hood, but can actually understand intuitively, in some sense, how to work with this, how to be able to move in certain ways that doesn't feel like they're just thinking about technology, right? So there's obviously loads of problems with that approach as well. One, in designing some of those things, I have to know how tall the performer is. So if they're a foot taller or shorter than I imagine, then I have to change the design. Of course, you can do all this dynamically, but the more you can have done beforehand, the easier it is in performance. So some of the other things that maybe this gets me thinking about quite a bit is the role of a computer music designer. So I've noticed how I write things for myself and how I write things for other performers are quite different. So I can write whatever my computer has got, or whatever software I have, I can make use of any of that when I'm performing live. But if I'm writing for someone else, then then I have to think about what's portable on their computer. Maybe it's at a distance and I can't set it up with them. Maybe it's all happening over Skype call, things like that. Maybe you want it to be performed by multiple performers. And the problem with a lot of that is we're building everything upon kind of a moving landscape a lot. So I'm sure everyone is very, very familiar with this problem. That operating systems and software get updated, and as a result, a lot of our work becomes quite ephemeral. And you think, do I accept that? Do I just write for now and know that it's okay if it can't work next week or next year or whatever? And as a result of that, we kind of, we sacrifice kind of long-term reliability, or do we try to make things that are very, very compatible, very portable? Do we design our own hardware as well? Does everything run off? Do we write our own OSs to run a lot of this and know that it will work? We just have to ship it around the world and it'll only work on that. So these are, all of them have their advantages and drawbacks, and I haven't come to a concrete answer on it at all. More that just different approaches for different designs, for different pieces, and for different performers. So I still don't really know. So I'm coming more with questions. So a lot of this stuff, the more I think about it, the more I think I have understood a bit more of what I'm trying to do, a bit more of what performance means in electronic music, the more I feel I'm further from solutions sometimes. One big issue is with a lot of this stuff, with a lot of movement-based music. I still want to be a composer performer, and I'm worried that I will become a bad movement artist. Instead of concentrating on what does it mean to be a performer of electronic music and not a movement artist. So that's so more problems and more questions than solutions, perhaps. I'm not sure how many other people are considering some of these kind of things, but that's pretty much where I'm at. That's presenting some of my research. Happy to discuss at over coffee and things if anyone would like to do so. And happy to take some questions if we have time as well. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I think you open a lot of questions, and I think it's we can take 10 minutes now to kind of react and debate.
Nice.
I thank you very much for your presentation, which was very interesting. It sounds like augmented instruments, in the sense you don't sacrifice the very core of the instrument techniques or craft, but you augmented it through different means you have to learn. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you use electronic things and patches and coding and all these things in order to enhance the human aspect of the music and living the movements. And it sounds very integrative and very interesting at that point. And my question is, you mentioned left hand and right hand movements with some peculiarities. What about the special legs and through the space, creating like an artificial environment, a space, a room, even through Skype? The other one person is 10 meters from me, and creating the sound which goes with it and changing the kind of reverberation in order to have the special aspect of your all, not only the local referential coordinates, but also the world coordinates, like in computer graphics softwares, you know what I mean? Relative, Galilean relative referentials. Yeah. So when you move the feet, you move in the space. And when you move the hand, you move the hand towards the center of yourself, kind of things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it's quite interesting. I think I have I spend a lot of time putting sensors on myself to see what I do, and one thing that's maybe a personal barrier is that I want to be thinking about the sound and moving in the way that creates the sound that I want, and not so self-conscious about about my own movement, you know. So, but I have realized that some of these things, everything is intuitive to us, right? But it's not intuitive to anyone else. So it makes perfect sense that volume is here. Of course, volume is here, I think, right? Everyone else, no, someone else, no, volume, of course, is here. So, that's quite a challenge, and in some ways it's quite interesting to find then and map the ways that feel more natural to different people. So sometimes I have designed these to map in a certain way for me, and then when I have given them to someone else, I've realized, it looks awkward for them to move like that, so I'll change the mapping to what looks and feels more natural to them. So for some people that might be much more physical movement, and it might be walking around the room, or for someone else it might be really, really small movement.
We have another question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are not alone. there are many people that are concerned with this kind of question, and there are communities that very much relates to these issues. So thank you so much for this presentation. I guess sometimes questions are more important than solutions or answers, isn't it? So it's very important to ask the right question. The feeling is, of course, that like sometimes technology and scientific approaches get to bite out, so get like are privileged, let's say. Also, just looking at where the monies are, where investments are made, and so. But in any way, just there is like a big community which is in between like arts and design. That look very much to research through design approaches, so ways to generate knowledge with artistic practice. So it's, I mean, I'm not gonna, but just as a more general reflection, I have a more specific question that relates to the previous one. Have you ever considered there is a lot of research in ancillary movements, so movements that are not directly related to sound production, but they're very, very, very crucial for the actual performance of music, which are like more, let's say, full body related. And so I was wondering if you, because there is I see a connection in there in the pieces you presented. So I was wondering if you ever.
Yes. So I have spent some time looking at kind of sonification of movement that you naturally already, I guess, are producing in the performance of that. I'm more interested in the control and the performing of two instruments, I suppose, at once, rather than purely the sonification of the resulting movement from performing the instrument.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but I guess there is a lot that can be explored in that direction, like how to exploit that kind of feeling and like intuitive motions that are already there in to make music and produce, not just to sonify them, but to create something that. So maybe, I don't know. Yes, that's just an open thought.
Yeah, I think perhaps it's I think it's completely valid what you're saying. I think it's probably more of an artistic choice, in that capturing a lot of that might be capturing micro movements, whereas if I'm quite focused on audience reception, maybe I'm exaggerating quite a lot, so the audience understands what this means, you know. Thank you.
Yes.
I wonder if any other composer changed their way to compose the music by gesture. So maybe they remember music from the gesture instead the notes or data. Or they change the way to think about the music, but from the gesture, or develop music from this instrument. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So sometimes. So I have been this particular controller that I've been using for too long, maybe. But so sometimes I have no sound and it's not plugged in, and I move with the controller and think, what would this sound like? What could this sound like? And I think, I can make a virtual drum kit fun, or I can make other things. And so led by the gesture, and then and producing. So move with this, imagine what the data looks like, then program it so you see what the data looks like, and get it to produce the sounds that you want. So yeah, I think sometimes that you can approach it from multiple directions, and you will get different results with the different ways that you approach it. So, yes.
Okay, I think actually there are tons of questions, and I'm sure everybody is just like computing now this question. I suggest that we stay on time. Thank you very much for this presentation. Of course, you stay with us so we can continue to think about it together. For instance, at the lunch break just after. So please, tons of applause again.
Merci beaucoup.